favorite co-host, Ignacio Esteban, retired ATF agent, and we're going to talk about some tyrants today. Ignacio, how are you doing?
Yeah, what's going on, bro? Another
All
good
right.
show, another good topic. I think the audience is going to love it.
Okay, so we're going to roll into these cases like right away, everything from Putin to Gaddafi and the books you've written about these characters, insight as a former federal law enforcement officer. Where are we going? You started off.
Yeah, man. Also, plus a little bit of background with me having my degrees in political science, history, and I also worked on my master's in international relations. And I've always had a passion. I've always been following these tyrants, politics, and of course our true crime background. These guys are one and the same.
Yeah.
A lot of these dictators are some of the most notorious criminals of the centuries, right? That we dealt with. So, obviously we saw what happened yesterday with Putin. We've seen what Qaddafi's done. Very, very similar attacks, very similar tactics. These guys think they're above the law. They do whatever they want. They mistreat their people. Not like what we have in democracy in our great country here, which people have to take advantage of. And these other countries, it's the strongman mentality. I'm the king. It's going to be my way or the highway. Or if not, it's going to be one of three things, right? You're going to be incarcerated, you'll be exiled, you're going to be executed.
Right.
And this is what these guys do.
And a lot of them, if they flee the country and say anything publicly, their whole family they left behind is retaliated on.
Yeah, any of these dissidents that decide to open, and I'm going to have a perfect example of that when we talk about Mohammed bin Salman and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the king himself, the corruption in Saudi Arabia, which unfortunately we have to deal with because we want oil and we should be oil independent nation. Right. We should be. And this is a topic we'll also talk about what's going on. And you can see it also in Nigeria with the coup that just happened in Nigeria with the military right there. These are nations that we're dealing with, which are the worst. And now we want to deal with Venezuela. We'll talk about Maduro also. Why don't we give this guy a lifeline, an ultra communist dictator, which is a narco terrorist, which is flooding our country under Hugo Chavez, and then we want to now with Chevron set up operations again. I'm sorry, we have to go fully independent.
Most people don't realize that. I think it is Chevron that's a fully Venezuelan-based company.
What? But why give them a life? They've been stopped as an OPEC nation for years because of what's been going on, and now all of a sudden we're going to give them a lifeline because we're getting frustrated with the Saudis. We're getting frustrated with what's going on in Nigeria. We're getting frustrated with the Middle East. Well, how about we go back to what we were doing when we were trying to be independent and we're producing and we provide for ourselves because we can't rely on these countries. There's no way.
I think it's true to say that Trump did have us finally energy independent.
We were.
He had the national strategic reserves fully topped off.
Yes.
I think they're like almost empty now with Biden.
Yes, sir.
That's stuff that we need for national defense.
Yeah.
He's using because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
The pipeline he wanted to the XL pipeline, right? There's a lot of places we have in North Dakota. We were independent. That's the way it should be because these nations are not to our par. They're extremely corrupt. They don't hold our moral standards and do things that are so irresponsible that we're shocked what they do. So right. We'll start with, and Gaddafi was another one. Libya is also another old nation also. I mean, we just looked at this whole nations and what we dealt with. And we'll start with Gaddafi because Gaddafi, if you haven't seen, I'll start with the end and then I'll work from the beginning. If you haven't seen what happened to Gaddafi, and if you don't know, he was an international terrorist for years. Look up what happened to Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie. We lost over 200, and I think the exact number is my book, 270 people were killed. A lot of them Americans. American carrier.
They had the bomb put on there.
Yeah, targeted. Gaddafi had his intel guys, his intelligence unit, plot that. This is his. He later would admit to this later through the UN to get some of the sanctions lifted on his country, thinking he was going to get away with this. No, this is the beginning of the end for Gaddafi. He had two military servicemen killed in a discotheque in Berlin. They were targeted because there were servicemen in there also in the 80s, right? He was behind Operation Black September with Munich in 72. And then when they kidnapped the Israelis and then executed them when the SWAT team came out. And then all the dead bodies came to Libya for them also under Operation Black September. So if you haven't seen the movie Munich or documentaries, Gaddafi's were behind that. He was financing. So who is Muammar Qaddafi? Let me start with that now. For the audience who don't know, he came from. You know how a lot of these kingpins or these drug dealers rise from abject poverty and become big up. Same was Gaddafi. He was a nomad Bedouin, right? His family were pretty much goat herders and camel herders in the deserts in North Africa, North Africa and Libya. Had nothing, no money. Family was not respected. The only thing he did was he joined the military, and that's how he rose in the ranks. And then he decided that he was tired of the corruption himself, and he wants to. And he's trying to figure out. He wrote a book about, and he's talked to his professors, how would be the best way to do a coup.
Wow.
And they pretty much told him, if you're going to do something like that, you've got to have the military behind you. Once you get the military, you'll be able to pull it off. And that's what he ends up doing. He ends up getting back in the military in the late 60s, and he ends up pulling off the coup and pushing out the king out of Libya. And I have more details in my book, the exact date. So Gaddafi rises to power. He becomes Colonel Gaddafi. He has the military. So he comes from nothing. His family's not really well respected. And all of a sudden now he's on top of it. But he's a little different. He ends up becoming more of a nationalist, Bill. He is an Arab nationalist socialist, almost admiring, not like the Soviets, but he does admire Fidel Castro. He does admire the control. And he starts nationalizing the oil companies in Libya. He expels Italians and Jews that were there for generations. He's very anti-European. He's very anti-American. He's very anti-British, obviously, anti-colonial, and he takes control.
Right.
He becomes a strong man. But because he's a very Arab socialist controlling guy, he doesn't like a lot of other minorities in Libya. So, of course, he does that also. He targets them and everything else. So that's a little history there. But then he pretty much starts arming a lot of these third world terrorist attacks. He's the money behind it. He's funneling them. He's attacking it. He doesn't like the United States. He comes after us. And at the end, because of what happened in Lockerbie, right, with Pan Am 103, what happened in the discotheque in West Berlin back also in the 80s, Ronald Reagan has enough, right?
I remember they hit his compound with some missiles. I think a baby died.
They even killed one of his adopted children, right?
I think that night he went out for a walk or was sleeping in a different outdoor tent or something.
Right. He has that kind of, but remember, he was very corrupt. He was stealing from the country also. Very corrupt guy. Very lucky he lived that attack. He called him, I think, Reagan, remember the speech? I was young when it happened. Remember, he said, he called him Mad Dog, right? He was Mad Dog. He's out of control. And that was Gaddafi. A little payback because a lot of Americans were killed because of this guy, right? And especially when you take down a plane like that. And now he does also in Niger, right, with a French airliner. He's behind that one also. He continues to keep on attacking, hitting, involved in all these wars around the world, assassination attempts in Africa. He wants to be a major player in that, but eventually catches up. Eventually you have the sanctions. Eventually it takes a toll on him, and Obama puts more pressure. There's a civil war, and things get ugly for him, right? He admits that he was behind. He does settle with the families from Pan Am 103. He does settle with the other families and pays, I think, over $1 billion to the family. He's thinking this is going to go away, but it doesn't. He tries to obtain weapons of mass destruction. He gets caught, and things get worse. Civil war breaks out. And if you haven't seen the video, folks, look how Gaddafi's ending comes. In that tunnel, at the end, 2012, I have in my book the exact time he was killed by his own people who had enough with him. They had enough, dragged him out. The mob took care of him, mob justice, and he's cowering, begging for his life. They shoot him and thump him and kill him.
I remember the video of that. There was a bunch of, the cell phones were getting pretty popular, and he was hiding, I think, in a drainage ditch with like one remaining bodyguard, and he had a golden, was it a 45 or something? And they were beating him. It was bloody, and brother, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
My understanding was a young kid that did that to him, and was obviously never prosecuted. He was, like a hero. But
he got what he deserved after what he's done to his own people, oppression. He was in power. Remember this, since the late 60s, and he came to a crashing end at the end in 2012. Obama administration had it with him also. They helped. They helped him. The U.S. supported the rebels with drone attacks. They helped with the drones. They helped attack. They located him. They gave the information. And at the end, they ended up taking care of him and his security team right at the end. He was in a small city in Libya there. I have it in my book where they end up getting not too far from where he was raised. And that's fitting in for him. and the way he went down.
Right, went back to his roots, figuring he'd be a little better protected there. Not the case. So,
Sirte, the town is called Sirte.
right.
Sirte, where he would end up being killed. His not far from his roots there, and at the end, Gaddafi. So Gaddafi, if you don't know much about him or you remember him, you know, and especially with a lot of people who are British, who lost a lot of family members because of what happened in Pan Am 103 and Lockerbie, Scotland. Right. It was a fitting end because some of the people who did it, remember, they even returned one of the terrorists back to Libya, right? So that was a fitting end for him.
I think that guy was that the Salami guy. He got some kind of compassionate release, nonsense.
Yes. A lot of these guys sometimes get that, and it's like,
was that the case that was tied into some corrupt CIA guy who had access to to purchase a certain type of timers, and he ended up going to prison, but he was sending them to the terrorist groups, I think, including Libya.
Unfortunately, we do have corruption in a lot of the FBI, CIA, all departments, all agencies have it. So I wouldn't be surprised that happened.
We should do a show about that. Like, law enforcement corruption in general is prominent cases. I don't know if that's uncomfortable for you to do, like, because you were an agent, but I think you're a stand-up guy, and it would be interesting.
Yeah, I definitely anything that's worth talking about and shedding to the light. I think it's worth doing.
Absolutely. All right. So who's the next character on our platter we're serving up here?
Yeah, we got quite a few. So if you like that one, you're gonna see the rise and fall of Muammar Qaddafi. I got a lot more information, a lot more details about him, his life, the rise and fall, and how he went down. So you haven't seen the video? I think it's, if you're not mistaken, Bill, it's like over 20 million have viewed that video. It's on a cell phone, and then it was posted on YouTube years ago. And you have to look at that. The final moments of a brutal dictator. That is fitting to see that. That is fitting.
That should be part of anytime a dictator becomes dictator, that should be part of their orientation, is viewing that video.
Mussolini. How about Mussolini?
How about when they hung Saddam Hussein, and just before they hung him, somebody hit him, threw a shoe at him. That's like a big insult in the Middle East. They get hit with somebody's shoe.
Yeah, they tried to do that to President Bush. Remember that? They were throwing the shoes at him at a press conference, and he was ducking. He was looking at him. He kept on ducking at him. He's like, those were different days, different times, Bill, different times. But and now we're talking about the Middle East. This goes right nicely into our next guy here, and we're going to talk about I think on numerous topics dealing with oil independence, how important it is, and we cannot rely on these rogue nations. These nations are corrupt to get our oil because it's not to our moral standards. These countries are they don't understand democracy. These are true dictators. They call themselves a royal family. But I put on my books, they are royal thugs. Yep. This is a family of thugs. They don't respect themselves. They kill themselves. And if you haven't seen this, Mohammed bin Salman, he's the crown prince, and King Salman, very corrupt family. There's not a family here. This is like the family, like the mafia. And the same terms I use, the Gambino family. Right. These are crime syndicates. And what they do is horrific. And I put in pretty detailed order what happens here. He's become in power for the last, I would say, 7-8 years. As a crown prince, maybe a little less. The exact time it's in my book there, and I'm going to put a classic example. And I think you've seen this video. If you haven't seen this video, check this out. And this would put in context what kind of monster MBS is. That's what they call him. Mohammed bin Salman. Everybody calls him MBS. That's what it stands for.
This is Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, an ally that we helped keep from Saddam Hussein. That's how things change, right? Hussein was probably going to invade Kuwait and then go to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
We stop it. The United States back in the early 90s, right? In the Persian Gulf War, right? But now they have become very corrupt, very arrogant. And now they're getting buddies with the Chinese and the Russians. That's how they thank us. So remember that, how history
was. I have friends and fans that treated me the same way.
Yeah. They say one thing, and then you get it right in the back, right? Yeah. And that's what this guy is, that kind of person. That kind of person. Remember this name, Jamal Khashoggi. Jamal Khashoggi.
Oh man, wasn't he the one butchered in the embassy? Yeah, he had
from MBS,
and he had his poor fiance waiting out. He was getting some paperwork or something.
Let me give the audience a little background on this guy. He was a major critic of the royal family, right?
And
of the Saudi royal family,
and he was a journalist. Yep.
And he was in the U.S. He was working for the Washington Post as a columnist at the time. He was applying for his residency, and his children are U.S. citizens. Remember that. His kids are U.S. citizens, applying to be a resident. He had to leave Saudi Arabia because the threats were getting so bad for him out there. He was a major critic. He worked for major news outlets. He was a writer. He was an editor. He did all those things here. And the poor guy, this is 2018, October 2018. He's going in there. He needs some paperwork from the Saudis for birth certificate so he can get married in Istanbul with his fiance, right?
Right.
One of the intel officers here recognized who this guy is. Remember, he's target number one for MBS. So they come up, and this is everything I read and what's been out there, what's been researched. So you can also confirm everything what I'm saying too.
Right.
So you have Saudi intel in the embassy in Istanbul. This is Turkey, right? So he's in Turkey. He thinks he's safe. If he was an American at the time, this wouldn't have happened, right?
I remember the story like it was yesterday. I go ahead. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was
I do too. I mean, something like this, because you know what happens? And I'll tell the audience what happens. You'll get your comments too. So he goes in there and they recognize him and they tell him to come back in about a week or so for his paperwork he needs, because that's going to give him time to come up with his operation. They told him, hey, not a problem. We'll get you the paper. Come back when you need. I think it was a birth certificate and something other stuff he needed so he can get married. That's all he wanted. So he said, okay, no problem. He comes back, and I think it was about a week and a half. I have the exact timeline in my book. So he comes back with his fiance. Little did he know that they already reached to MBS, and they sent a pretty much a hit squad to come in and take care of him, right?
Including a double of him, somebody who
a
looks
lookalike. But it wasn't too much of a lookalike because the guy ends up keeping his own shoes on. He really it's a circus show what they end up doing, how bad it really is. The guy really forgets to change his shoes. He keeps his own shoes on. You can tell it's the same guy, and he's pretending to go on this taxi ride at the end. And it's a joke. It really shows what amateurs these guys are, even doing something like this, and how sad and tragic this guy is.
It's farcical. They could pull that off maybe with their own citizens. But over here, trained investigators or even people with common sense would be like, wait a minute, that's not even the same person. I remember the video of his wife or his fiance outside pacing on her phone. Like,
yes,
she was there. She was there. He never came back out.
Before he left, he gave all his cell phones to her. He had a few of them. He gave her all his cell phones. I think he gave some other personal items to her so she could hide. She can have it. He goes inside, and the first thing you can hear him say, because unbeknownst to the Saudis, the Turkish government had the embassy wired. And they were released this to the CIA, who then will leak it to the media, right? So we was here.
Didn't he also have a tracking watch on of some sort when he went in?
But perhaps.
Or was that the cover story in the beginning of how they got the audio?
It could be, but later it came out that the whole embassy was wired.
Wow.
And they heard what happened in there, and you can hear Khashoggi's last words is, "You can't be doing this. I got people waiting for me outside." Right? And then you can only hear this: "I can't breathe. I can't." He says 3 times: "I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And then you hear the sound of a saw, and that's it. That was his last words. And he was a man doing the right thing. And because he pissed off the Saudi crown prince, who was a corrupt dictator, right? He had him executed, killed in a foreign country, an assassination in a foreign country, because he dared challenge him, dare speak his mind, and try to challenge his corruption, bring it to him.
I think one of the people intelligence identified as going in was one of the top torturers or assassins from Saudi.
Yes.
And that immediately thereafter, arterial blood, if he's still alive, is going to squirt and make a mess. That they had a cleanup crew come in, and then they repainted the area, and they wanted to come in and do forensics. What happened with that? Were they the Turkish government or the Americans, anybody ever able to get in and do proper forensics looking for
I don't
blood?
think so. They probably weren't cooperating with that at all. And there was phone calls made. They were tracking soon after to Riyadh, right? Saudi Arabia, talking. And this doesn't happen unless it gets approved from the top, right? That's the only way it can happen, because that's the way the control works. And you heard conversation, boss, this is done. Pretty much saying, hey, we took care of the business. And then this incinerator they had there, obviously there's ashes in there. They disposed of the body, right? They cremated the body. I mean, everything else to get rid of. And then they had the lookalike. I mean, it is just a perfect scenario there. It's definitely, it could have been the crime of the century. It wasn't for we had some other issues going on with Ukraine.
Right.
For sure.
So from my audience, and my understanding, and you know better, obviously, an embassy, when it's in another country, is considered the sovereign territory of the country whose embassy it is. Therefore, they can literally commit murder within the embassy. And let's say there was an embassy from France in D.C., they can do whatever they want inside that embassy. They're not accountable to local law enforcement, the feds, or anybody else.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of opportunity with diplomatic pouch where things are smuggled in, whether they weapons, poisons, drugs. There's a lot of opportunity with this cover of diplomatic immunity, diplomatic pouch. These are very, very protected facilities, and nobody's entitled to access to these places. So no murder is going to be pulled off within one of them unless it comes from the very top.
Of course, it has to come from the top. That he gave the order. He's in that conspiracy, and that's a lot of people think The Hague should open an investigation, right? And have him. But of course, are they going to extradite him? Most likely not. It's going to happen. And then the Saudis had the audacity to say, we'll have a trial here.
Okay.
What a joke.
I think there was a point where they said they had executed 2 of the people.
Oh, yeah.
That they just executed random people and said it was them.
You think a crown prince or the King Solomon are going to be held accountable for anything? They have the control power. They'll get some mope there, some patsy, right? And they'll throw them under the bus.
You know what's amazing? When Trump came in, he knew this was a huge issue with the oil and people not getting along, and we constantly getting drawn into endless wars. And I remember, I think it was in his first year, first few months, he convened a gigantic meeting of all of them from that region. Was that in Riyadh or something? And all these Arab nation leaders and representatives were there. And they said, you guys need to get along. We're here till this gets worked out. And there was all kinds of deals made, and countries were getting along better because of Trump.
Yeah.
And then,
but Trump had some issues. This is 2016. You're right. But by 2018, he had to deal with this mess because this guy, it's not anymore. And just before that, I'm gonna give you a little more old stuff he did a year earlier, in 2017, at the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. He ends up bringing richest dissidents, and he starts torturing them. He has his Tiger Squad.
They were on house arrest at the Ritz-Carlton Riyadh.
Yeah. I mean, and you know what ends up happening? He ends up seizing all their bank accounts. He said, allegedly, the Crown Prince, the family made over $1 trillion. What they did there, stealing all that money. It's amazing the corruption, what they do to dissidents, anybody who opposes, like minorities, dissidents. And then he had the worst mass execution. I think it was in 2022, a few years ago, last year actually, 80 plus people executed in one day. Minorities, dissident, women's, gays, anybody that he didn't, and it's due process in their mind. There's no trials, right? You're guilty, you're done. And you know how executions are over there?
They cut their head off.
Yeah, beheadings.
Yeah.
Beheadings. They said they swords. I mean, that's how they do it. Quick and dirty. Quick, 80 plus, because I'm tired. I don't like, no. And that's how it is. And we're getting oil from these people. That's the problem. That's what I'm talking about. That's part of the problem.
We the Democrats get in power. The people who vote for them, unfortunately, have really blood on their hands. If you think about it, and this is my opinion, YouTube and everybody else, because you're constantly voting for people that are supporting tyrants because you want to push our country into electric vehicles, which right now the technology and infrastructure is not there yet. They're too expensive. They're too expensive for most people. It's going to happen in due course anyway, one way or the other. But let us take its natural progression. You can't force it by forcing people to pay, crazy amounts for gas where they can't pay the rest of their bills. I just got out of prison. I was having trouble filling up my tank, or getting gas. Literally, I was struggling when I got out of prison. I was like, how the hell is gas $5 or $7 a gallon?
Now it's getting lower, but we need to start making more and becoming, because we were doing well. Open the pipelines, start producing more. We have to do it.
It's sort of like politics 101. They'll do what it takes to bring the price down, the Democrats, right before an election.
Oh, yeah.
Look at how it brought the prices down. Well, wait a minute. You had people lose their houses because you're responsible for them bringing up to begin with. But the Democratic voters so quickly forget the hardship they went through the second they voted this guy in or any other Democrat.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work out well, Bob, because he can't control this inflation. Interest rates are getting out of control. It's going to be almost like Jimmy Carter in a year from now. It's going to be it's about 7%, 6%. Some people think it's going to be 12% by next year. Try to get a car or a house paying 12% interest. Not going to happen. You need to pay cash. Cash is king. Don't be financing anything. It's not worth giving the bank that kind of money.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
It's going to get worse. That's going to get worse. So that's part. And then he has a special Tiger Squad, which he has, MBS, that also takes care of family members or close to family that doesn't listen to him. Just like he did Khashoggi. He also has. You should look online. I put in my book how many accidents, just like Putin, right? How many accidents, car accidents, airplane accidents happen with family members? Very suspicious. Very suspicious. Family members. So
Yeah, these people are treacherous. I mean, I remember when the Soviet Union was in, and was it Georgy Markov? He was a Bulgarian dissident against the communists, a radio broadcaster. I remember they hit him with the umbrella in the leg and gave him the ricin capsule and all that, and that killed him. That was child's play compared to what's going on, because Putin, as we know, is still, he's using even radioactive weapons to kill his enemies.
Radioactive, wherever he brings his goon squads out there, and then each one of them, reporters and anybody's a critic of him, man, all these guys are slipping out of these open windows. Man, I don't know what's going on. And then, of course, they tell these crazy stories with straight faces. Oh, he slipped. He was moving the bathtub. The window happened to be open, and out he went. Wow, really? Yeah, man, people are slipping. Oh, he was walking down the stairs. Oh, man, he had a bad accident.
Right.
Yeah, sure he did.
They break his neck and then leave him at the bottom of the stairs and say he fell.
That's what they do.
But meanwhile, trained investigators like we have would know that the difference between a push and somebody who went tumbling, or they'd look for scuff marks and everything to see if you were pushed or.
There's no investigations there. Putin says he's a tyrant. He's a dictator. Yeah, that's why Putin's tyranny. I call the book Putin's Tyranny. And I said, like I said, with Mohammed bin Salman, blood, money, and oil, right? The Mohammed bin Salman regime. And then I have also right here with Putin's his regime. And then what happened to yesterday? And we were talking a little bit about it yesterday.
Right.
A Wagner security progenitor, right? I know I'm mispronouncing that name. But I think it looks like maybe he shot the plane down to kill all those people to get to him.
I put a short up yesterday. I found the footage online of this crazy plunging plane. Come to find out that he was in a business jet. There was 10 people on board. And this is the guy we just talked about, stopped short of trying to overthrow, take over
the Kremlin.
Russia. He stopped short of Moscow. Intelligence seems to be saying that he was so concerned about it, he had already fled the capital, Putin. So this guy could have continued and then took over power. He's just as bad as Putin.
Yes.
But at least it would have been a change. And, Putin would have possibly been held accountable.
Remember what we said when we did the show, Bill?
He's not going to last.
He can't last.
He's not going to last. This isn't our show. Ignacio and I did. And I'm sure we're not the only ones making the predictions. Not like we're, geniuses and stuff. But common sense dictates.
Common sense tells you, right, Bill?
The guy in the adjoining country from Belarus was a puppet of Putin. And that's where they sent him for his safety and made a deal with him. You'll be okay. Just go over there. I forgive you. I said, he's not going to forgive him. He's going to wait a little while. He's man.
And they kill you.
Yes.
It's been 2 months to the day when they killed him. 2 months to the day when he tried to do the uprising, when he almost had the mutiny, and he killed. And the missing wing, when a plane's coming down, it's a good indication that it was taken out.
That has Stinger missile written all over it. Or what do they call? What do they call the missiles they use over there? The surface-to-air missile.
Surface out. They took that plane down. You can see the footage. There's no wing there. And the only thing is that, like I said, he was for a while Putin's right-hand guy for dirty wars, right? Dirty wars in Africa. He's a mercenary, gun for hire, dirty wars. He had like over almost 60,000 mercenaries at his disposal in Syria, in Ukraine. But the war in Ukraine got turned so bad. He said he lost 25,000 of his guys. He had it. He said, this is my money. You're messing with my guys. I've had it. And that's why he had this march. And he took over major operations. And they let him pretty much, if he wanted to, the military pretty much walked away and said, go to the Kremlin.
Of course, because the military itself in Russia, from my understanding, is so disgusted about what's going on. They were lied about why they were going into Ukraine to begin with. And they were putting their coordinates on social media. Hey, here's where we are on the battlefield. Commanders were doing this, which allowed intelligence agencies to, give targeting information to target people based upon their social media use out in the battlefield.
Yeah.
I mean,
and a lot of these guys would use their cell phones too.
Right.
And they were tracked. So the radio was so bad. Radio communication was so bad. They went to their cell phone, not understanding that they're getting tracked. It's very easy to track you through your cell phone. Right.
And they're sending selfies home to their family. Here we are. I can't wait to come home. And next thing you know, a missile hits them.
Yeah, no, they're all done. They all get cooked up. And like I said, it's an unjust war. It's a sovereign nation. This is Putin's agenda. And that's something else we can talk about also, is where is this war going to stop? I know we did a show on RFK Jr. A lot of people are saying, how many of these endless wars? Biden had ugly stop Afghanistan. We lost 13 servicemen recklessly because we had Taliban do security at Kabul airport. That was the worst retreat I think we ever did. We won the war. I know we got fed up with it because we've been there for 20 years, but that's not the way you have the Taliban. We couldn't even get our Americans out. I mean, it really was disgraceful, the ending here. And now this is going to be another endless war. He said he didn't want endless war. Well, now you got one here because you're not getting an end to it. We're spending already 150 billion, right? Money that's not being used in our country. Hey, the Ukrainians got most of their country. Crimea and Dubai's region, it's disputed. Work out a treaty for that. Maybe have UN peacekeepers do something.
Right.
But this has to end because if not, we're going to spend another $1 trillion on another war where it's going to cost them lives. And we got to figure out where we're going to go with this. And this
we have a massive homeless crisis in this country. The dollars would be better spent. You know, it's just disgusting. Like I said, these politicians get in, and you wonder, like, you always have to follow the money. It's all about money and power. Yeah. They don't care. No matter what party they're in, it seems like they just don't give a crap. I mean, you look at the major cities, there's homeless people sleeping anywhere. There's apps in Los Angeles to show you where to avoid human feces. Don't step into feces because the homeless people are everywhere. Oh, there's another dead body here. There's another dead body there. The federal courthouse, the Nancy Pelosi courthouse in San Francisco. Yeah. The employees don't want to go to work because it's surrounded by sleeping dead and drug addicted homeless people.
Yeah, I saw that too when I was commuting to DC and headquarters with the ATF at Union Station. I was appalled. And this was just before the whole breakout with COVID. Then we work from home. I was happy. I can work from home and I deal with that. And then I retired. It was appalling how many people were homeless around Union Station. Right. It was shocking. I've never seen that before ever. City of Miami had a little bit, but what I saw there in DC was appalling. And that was then. I imagine now I try to avoid that whole area. I don't like it. I don't go there. I'll be honest with you. I don't like it. Yeah. And if you want to look at pictures online with junkies everywhere, look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia is full of needles everywhere on the floor. You're like, what is going on here? Why didn't they?
And there's a new drug. I don't know what the hell drug they're using, but it makes them walk around bent over like zombies, and it's like land of the living dead. I'm like, what in the world are these people taking?
Yeah, Oakland has that area there, all homeless people living in burning and everything, camp cities and all that. There were a lot of DC camp cities like that where people were just there camped out, and a lot of drugs, a lot of violence, a lot of people just dying all the time or just waiting to die. It's really in America we need better. So this stuff we need to do better.
They have these, like I said, these weird drugs out that didn't exist before I went to prison or weren't popular, prevalent. Fentanyl. If I couldn't just stay clean myself, because I did enjoy my cocaine back in the day, I don't make a secret of it. I don't smoke. I don't take pills. I don't even drink. But I used to use a lot of coke, and I wouldn't even dare touch it today because God knows what some idiot put inside of it.
Cutting edge. Yeah, it's not FDA approved, folks. Hey, that's not FDA approved.
Who the hell puts fentanyl in something that's trying to bring people up, and the dose could kill me? Now I have a friend who's he was an anesthesiologist. And he told me he was in medical school in New York. What do they call them, residents or something? Uh-huh. Him and his buddy, they took cigarettes and they dipped them into liquid fentanyl. And his buddy did it first and was about to pass it to him and blacked out. And he had to keep him in on life support, privately for a day until he came out of it, because had they admitted what happened and sought help, they would have been thrown out of medical school and probably arrested. He said, and this is in the 90s, he told me this story. He says, man, he said, I will never screw around with these drugs again.
Fentanyl is really destroying this country from within. Fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and a lot of these countries, and we're going to make a little loop here, going back to South America and what's going on with Maduro. And the former president of Honduras, Hernandez, was extradited because he was helping the military. These guys were caught saying they are weaponizing these drugs against the United States so it can fall like a rotten apple from within. They know the problem. People recognize this country has a problem with drugs. Our enemies recognize it.
I'm not going to try to give them I'm not trying to give them ideas of what they can do with fentanyl to mass harm people, but there's plenty of things they can do, and it's scary. I don't let anybody prepare my food or hand me my food, or I watch everything very carefully.
You know what we need to spend more money on treatment. Getting these people off, getting their lives back together, right? Get them away from it. I'm not a big fan of Governor Newsom. I think he's been a disaster. I heard the money he spent on homeless has been wasted. And the situation is worse than when he took office. He brags he spent this amount of money, but he wasted it because it wasn't accountability, and a lot of it was stolen. So the way they approach things out there, unfortunately, in California, it's a lot of it's wasted. That's why there's a mass exodus out of California. I know a lot of people left California. They want nothing to do with California. Higher taxes, crime's out of control, no accountability, out of California. Escape from New York, escape from California.
Oh yeah, I developed an unlikely friendship there with a guy, and I'll put his name on here. His name is Brian Bobbitt. Now Brian has asylum signs. He makes signs, mostly political signs. He'll make them for both parties. He's a dyed-in-the-wool lefty. We agree not to argue about politics, and he's one of my top fans. He's become a really good friend.
Oh, good.
He goes to concerts. He sends me clips. And he's a gigantic advocate for the homeless and helping them more and building shelters, right? Which, okay, both parties should be doing that, but he's pushing this, because I went to Fresno. As you know, I have a loved one out there that was helping her move.
Right.
And there's homeless people everywhere, under the bridges. You go to 7-Eleven, there's like 6 or 7 of them milling around, asking you for money when you come out. I can't say no when somebody's suffering. I'm just that kind of person. So when I just saw it pulling up, I took it upon myself. I bought, a bunch of bananas, whatever, some other stuff. And as soon as I walked out, I said, hey, guys, share this fairly amongst yourselves. Of course, one of them grabbed all the bananas and ran off. But,
sure, that's going to happen.
But I said, look, and I couldn't believe it. I got back to the house and I told Mary, I said, oh, my God, there's like really mentally ill, half-dressed, strung out people that are homeless, like sleeping all around the 7-Eleven. And they're like, Fresno's like this. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
That's everywhere in the country. I talked about DC. I've seen it. Using California, seen it. Miami had some. They have mental health issues. We have mental health crisis in this country. They're a bunch of crazy. They need to have treatment. We need to remove them from that situation because you don't get them out of the environment, it doesn't change. And for a great country like ours, the greatest country in the history of the world, to have this kind of problem and not to solve it, that's shame on us. Yeah. We need to take care of it. And a lot of them are veterans too, by the way. A lot of them are veterans who could not get their lives together, and we deserve to help our veterans and not let them die in the street like that. They serve their country; they deserve to be treated better like that.
Right? They've been traumatized by maybe life circumstances or by being in the war, the horrible things they've seen. Friends getting killed and mangled in front of them. I mean, these things take their toll. Yeah. I never thought these things, like, I thought maybe I was one of these guys where, like, that's just not having a strong faith or being a little bit weak. But I've experienced some like trauma things I've seen in prison, guys getting killed and shot and all this. And I look back at it now, and I actually have been traumatized by it. I don't go seek help and take pills and all that stuff, but I do realize some of that stuff bothers me. When I think about it, I get really freaking depressed and like, man, I can't believe I was around that. And this poor person, they suffered, or, this happened. And
people are not strong-minded.
Yeah.
That can consume people. And then on top of that, you put drugs in the mix.
Exactly.
It's a toxic situation that they go down there. So that's the money from the war that we need to be spending. The war needs to be stopped. And then energy independence. Why are we helping finance the Saudis? Why are we helping Nigeria? And Nigeria is another country, and people don't know, it had a coup, a lot of corruption. I wrote a book about a failed state, Nigeria, and the problems in Nigeria going on. They even have Islamic terrorists out there also, right? They're black terrorists, right, that target black Christians.
Yeah.
You see that a lot, and you see the shootings and attacks, what's going on there. So Nigeria is a country that we buy also oil, not as much as the Saudis or other countries, and now they're thinking about Venezuela also, getting a lifeline to Nicolas Maduro, right? As, like I said, narco-terrorist dictator, and give him a chance at life again, where he stole the last election. He's not a legitimate winner, right? And on top of that, he's a narco-terrorist dictator pumping drugs to us through used to be called the FARC, through Colombia, through Central America, possibly Mexico, and pumped right into the United States. A big problem. No, we don't need these countries. We don't need them.
Wasn't it FARC that they did some kind of peace initiative where they put balloons with messages on them, and they flew them over, and they put them in a river to float up to them because they couldn't get near them, saying, "Look, we're willing to sit down with you. It's time for peace talks."
That's over. Yeah, they said the peace is done there, but it's other groups in the mountains putting drugs, and now they elected a communist. They won because now they elect a communist president. I have his name in the book. So you have communists all over, socialists all over South America, Central America, right? Mexico, Lopez Obrador, he's a socialist. I mean, it's just consumed the region, and we have a
What's
socialist
the
in
title
Canada.
of that? What's the title of that book again, Ignacio? For the viewers, you can find my books, Ignacio's book, links in the description on Amazon. Check him out. Check out Ignacio's books. He's a prolific writer. With
You got evil regimes. We have killers and tyrants. We have individual books on Gaddafi, Maduro, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong Un, Little Rocket Man, what Trump used to call him, Putin's regime.
which was the one specifically about Nigeria? So I want to put that up.
A failed state, Nigeria.
Failed state. There you go. Check out the link in the description.
That was before the coup just happened. I wrote this last year, and I was already seeing the massive corruption and problems. And what got my attention is, they have big problems with terrorist groups. And I have the name of the group in the book there, and it's an Islamic black terrorist group that goes after black Christians. So they don't care. People out there, they want an Islamic state, right? Just like Gaddafi he wanted an Arab socialist state, right? And he was a nationalist. So these guys get radicalized. And if you're not, like I said, like MBS, all these guys, they have their own ideas in their heads. Maduro, if you're not a communist, oh, well, I'm going to take Hugo Chavez was a communist, right? Maduro, his father was a hardcore communist, family of communists. In fact, he sent his son to the communist school in Havana to be tutored by Castro and his cronies.
Right.
And these guys become hardcore, but you know what he is now? He's a capitalist. If you haven't seen the video, check out the video of the drone strike that almost killed him a few years ago.
I remember he was at a speech or something.
You see his wife panicking? His wife knows something's going on. She's a small lady. She knows, and she's panicking already. The generals are panicking. And Maduro, arrogant that he is, that's what he is. They call him Bruto Maduro. He's a brute, right? He's stubborn. He's like arrogant. He's staring it down. There was explosives in there. It blew up before it got to him. He was an arrogant. He almost got killed for his own arrogance right there. He should have left the area.
Yeah, I don't care how tough you are, explosive. Still,
drones coming close to him and explodes. If it exploded too early, it would have killed all of them. If it got where it's supposed
I remember there was something went wrong. Now they probably have, like, I know a lot of intelligence law enforcement have devices that can block the signal and not allow them close and all that stuff. Yeah. So do you think something like that happened? That was maybe security.
I just read that it went off early. He got lucky. He got lucky and assassinated, but it could have been a bloody civil war also. But he stole the election. There's no doubt he has stolen. And then all these mass executions going on also in Venezuela. If you haven't seen all the stuff going on out there, right. It's horrible. I have a lot of friends Venezuelan. I grew up in South Florida, right out there, and it's pretty much they've converted Doral into little Venezuela, little Caracas. But it's a lot of money. They brought a lot of oil money too.
It's interesting you should say that. I went to I think it was 92. I went to an event that was called the Encuentro con Cristo, 1992, and there was a lot of Venezuelans at that conference. And guess where it was held? At the Doral.
Yes,
the Doral Resort. Now Trump owns the Doral now.
You should see how it is today, Bill. I remember in the 90s,
the surrounding area,
strawberry fields, right? There's huge development you wouldn't imagine. It's complete country. Our office with ATF is in Doral, so I spent a lot of time in that area. Right. It is enormous. They have a huge mall too, by the way, called the Dolphin Mall. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive out there.
The Dolphin. Wasn't there something? Not the Mall of the Americas. Something in the Americas also.
The Mall of America, it's okay, but the Dolphin Mall is a lot bigger. And of course, you got older the Dadeland Mall, and you've got other ones and stuff
like that. A little further north, I remember back that time. Sawgrass Mills was being built.
That's a big one too. That's a big one there. Now, Florida, if you like malls, folks, it's a little size thing. There's plenty to do.
Yeah. All right. So what else do we have? Anything else? Though, you can check out these books. We're going to sit down. We're going to be back here every Saturday night, 8:00, and in the meantime, putting out shorts and other things, and just really for crime prevention and educational purposes, news purposes. But Ignacio brings a wealth of experience, and his books primarily are free if you're a Kindle member.
Kindle Unlimited subscriber. Yeah. KU. If you're a KU subscriber, Kindle Unlimited subscriber, books are free. But if you're not, all my books are under $10. Most of them around $5. My Audible book, ATF Undercover, $6 on Audible. And I had free credits. I gave them a lot to people. They really enjoyed it. I think, Bill, you enjoyed it also.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your comments on that.
Very, very insightful.
And your books also.
Yeah.
And you got books coming out too, Bill, right?
Hopefully. You're a prolific writer. I'm like more distracted trying to learn technology and not getting to my writing, which I need to. I have, the 2 books out. I write True Crime from victim perspective and my interaction with certain now infamous people that I've met. And I have another one coming out. It's going to be my autobiography like yours. But it's going to have a thread of how I personally believe God brought me through a lot of dangerous situations when I was too stupid to know what I was getting myself into. Because I'm like, not that I'm hapless, but I was so maybe arrogant in those days. I just thought I could hang with anybody and do anything and pull anything off. And I've been shot out. I've been, we went to rob a bank one time. I don't know if did I tell you about the attempted bank robbery? Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Yeah. I chickened out at the last second. I was with a guy who was a real killer. His name was Buttons. And his mother was warning me away from this guy and said, he's going to kill you after a big heist. And him and his uncle were about doing takeover bank robberies. And somehow in the beginning of my addiction, they convinced me to go with them on a takeover bank robbery. As the driver, I'm the getaway driver. No, this is in New York.
In Miami?
In Brooklyn. It happened in Brooklyn in the 80s. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, but I was already into security and alarm system, locksmith, and I was going to security conferences. And I know the apprehension rate for bank robbers is like 90-something%. So I'm doing the math, and I'm dealing with some real thugs, some really hyper violent people who were strung out on drugs. And, I was using coke, but they were using everything else. The one guy was known as a hitman. He killed a lot of people. He shot a policewoman during a police raid on where he was selling some dope. And he was a really dangerous dude. He was like he could go between the Irish mob in New York and the Italians and do random, things for different people. So he found out about my skills and befriended me. We did some burglaries and stuff together, but his mother would always warn me. Back then I was in my early 20s. Billy, please stop hanging out with my son. He kills almost all of his partners. If you put a lot of money in front of him, it's all his. You're going to lose your life. You're a nice guy. Please get away from my son.
Not good.
So I'm not listening. I go to do this, and we pull up, and it was a drizzly day. I think it was November of 85, something like that. This strip mall. And their thing was one goes in, immediately vaults the counter with a bag, and the other one's in the lobby. Everybody lay down, shoots into the ceiling. Everybody lay down, boom, and everybody just drops. Boom, so I've heard their story many times. And I said, sure, I'll drive. What a stupid thing to say. We get there, stolen car. I'm behind the wheel, and I'm a fairly good driver. I was known for being a very good driver. And just before they got out, I pull out, right, with them still in the car. They're like, what the F are you doing? What are you doing? I said, there was a police officer doing his patrol. He just pulled behind the strip mall. You're full of shit. You coward. You this, you that. So I got pistol whipped and beat up and called every name in the book. And I don't care. No. I went home. I had a gun in my mouth. My tooth got cracked. I said, I don't care what these guys do to me. I am not robbing a bank with these dudes. I mean, I could have been
it'll be a good, Bill. It'll be interesting. Yeah, you're lucky to be here, Bill, for sure. It'll be interesting read for sure.
Wait till you read my book. You're going to be like, what the hell? Yeah. But I didn't want them to get out. Books.
And when you do an Audible,
I didn't want to get out.
Be good too.
And I didn't want to get out of the car and leave them there. Then I'd probably just get myself killed when they caught up with me. And I was like, I am not letting them go through with this. I am not going to, they might kill somebody. They might, it's bank robbery. They solve them. And they had a previous MO with the FBI.
They always end up bending.
Yeah. And they had that was their known MO. They were known by law enforcement for that MO, the counter jumping and
And they probably get about what 10, 20,000 from a lick like that.
Who knows? To try to involve you, they'll say, "Yeah, we're going to get 50 or 80 grand or something." It's all nonsense.
You get nothing. You get nothing at the end, but get pistol whipped at the end.
Yeah, I got my ass beat pretty good. And then he got
interesting story, Bill. So we got plenty of those good. So, folks, if you like those stories, look at my book. Look at Bill's stuff here. Listen to all the things we got going on. Any other ideas? Let us know. Well, anything else you want to talk about? We'll be more happy to look into it, do some more research,
and put this out there to get the audience. I'm going to put this out there to get the audience ready for this. So, in my autobiography and partially my books that are already out, there's more crazy incidents like this. I'm going to give you 2 quick ones, and they're going to take 10 seconds, even though the story will take an hour to explain. I was picked up by the Secret Service for an assassination threat on President Carter when I was like 13 years old because my mother was mentally ill, loved him, was sending pictures, and she sent a picture of me holding a BB gun. And the next thing I know, I'm getting picked up by the Secret Service in New York, taken to the World Trade Center. You know, and there's a big long story, but obviously I wasn't meaning any harm to the president. Neither was my mother. And so, and another time, flying out of Miami, you were probably just a young kid in grade school or something. I think it was 1980, 81. There was, I think, 11 hijackings in the same week going back to Cuba. You remember that? There was a bunch of hijackings of I think the Marielitos or something were hijacking planes to try to go back. They were bringing gasoline bombs on board and all that. So my brother-in-law looks Cuban, right? He's deceased now. Stocky guy, muscles, New York attitude, you know, curly hair, but he could pass for Cuban. He's got the broken nose, you know, he's got this tough guy look, right? So he's got a gun on his ankle, and he drops me off at Fort Lauderdale Airport. At that time, they were living in Coral Springs. He says, "Hey, I got my piece on me. I'm not going to take you through security, man. You know, we gave each other a hug and we left." Well, I had only a small carry-on to go back to New York, and I forget what the other indicators were, but when I went to get my ticket back then, you picked up a ticket. The lady wrote a P in red ink and circled it on the ticket jacket. I fly a lot. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. I step away from the counter. I go to the conveyor belt. Next thing you know, security's on me, laying me up against this thing, opening my pants in front of other passengers, and they handcuffed me and dragged me off to an interrogation room. If I remember correctly, it was Wackenhut Security and FBI, and I was flying out of Air Florida, a now defunct airline. So that story's in there where they wanted to charge me, you know, a Caucasian with blue eyes, with being a potential Cuban hijacker because they were on high alert that week that I flew. They said I fit the profile because I was a single male of a certain age flying alone. I had no check bags. I was paid in cash. There was so many things that they called red flags.
Variables. They said, let's go. I was like, come on, man.
I sued and I won for that experience and missed my flight. Yes. Many weird.
That's another good story. Yeah, we got plenty of good stories in there for sure, Bill.
All right, Ignacio, great to have you back, and hope the audience loves the show.
Another good show.
I request the audience to leave comments here, and then later as it comes up on YouTube searches, and just share these stories. You know, we're trying to help people raise awareness, and if you see a highly charismatic guy with any kind of questionable background, trying to be, you know, run your country, I think you should run the other way. Nobody knows who to trust usually till after the fact, but sometimes these guys have certain warning signs and character traits that you can look for. So we might post something about that as well. All right, Ignacio, thank you for joining.
All right, Bill. Thanks, man. All right, guys. Thank you.
I'm blessed. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And another episode of Steel Spotlight is in the can. See you guys next time.